Hey everybody, welcome to AR Explainer. Always have to smash that unmute button. That's the word of the day. And today we're going to have a bit of a tour of our post-COVID world, or post-vaccine world, as it were. Things are looking up. Seems like one day they're up, one day they're down, but they're definitely moving. So I'm going to add our buddy Adam, unmuted. I think you've muted yourself, Adam. So unmute yourself. There you go. Cool. Hey, buddy. How's it going?
Very good. Very good. How about you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Let me just get that out of the way there. So we've got Adam for now. We may have Alex Allenson join at 1.2. Both great guys from Indy. And before we get kicked off, I just wanted to share something, a little bit of inspiration that just rolled into my Instagram feed, which is very appropriate to today's discussion. And this is a piece of work by Visualize, and just posted it 5 hours ago. This is Paris, which, as we know, or you may or may not know, has a curfew of 6 p.m. So it's full COVID times there, right? But you still see, this is the Louis Vuitton flagship store. And there's some cool audio that goes with this that we can't have audio and this at the same time. But there's a cool tune there. And then you get a bit of the Louis Vuitton branding up there. And it struck me as very appropriate for today's conversation, because I think that there's one school of marketing thought that says, don't try anything new, don't bother, right? Because let's just wait till it's over. And then there's this other school of thought that says, why would we wait? Why wouldn't we do something? Like, this is a brand doing something with a physical space that's currently not being used in the way that it was. People, of course, are walking by it, so they've thought of another way to use it. And that is, either there as you're walking by, which is the way that you're currently experiencing Louis Vuitton, right? Is that you're walking by the store and you're going home and you're ordering something. And then also just the moment you create online when you share something like this. So Adam, today wanted to just pick your brain a little bit about today's topic, which is, as we look at the world that we live in now, and look forward to maybe even the next 12 months, how does augmented reality fit into that? Does it fit into that? And how can we start to place those things? So is that a good topic? Is that good enough?
Oh, yeah.
You got enough to cover?
Sure. It's a great
Cool.
topic, and I think it's important to kind of explore, as you mentioned, what's going on in the world in general, and what's kind of the natural reaction of first, people and consumers to what's happened in the past 12 months or so, or 10 months or so, and then how brands are reacting. So I think I think it's a good starting point to kind of look at what's going on in the world, and then we can really look into how AR can fit in there.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, if I look at something like that Louis Vuitton activation, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that has happened kind of in COVID times with AR, I think it's just a really kind of inspiring example of just not giving up and not just doing the basics. One could get by with the basics. But I think that there will come a point when the basics probably include AR, right? So I wanted to instead of being like the big fancy thing, it's more like the thing that you tick off your list. Oh, what about AR, right? So I think we still have to move to that point. But before we get to a discussion of just that kind of everyday AR and marketing thinking, just wanted to kind of get your view. If you look around the world that we live in now, you work obviously closely with a lot of marketers as well. You also just live in the world, right? So if you look at what's changed, yeah. So you do seem, as far as I know, you're a human being living on this earth. You're not a simulation. So if you were, that would be equally interesting. The new product launch from Indy, here it is.
You're thinking about it, yes.
Yeah. And I think the big question from a marketer standpoint is, okay, there's lots of big stuff happening, but what changes do you feel like are here to stay for, I guess, the intermediary period of this year? Like, what does this year look like in terms of how things have changed? And when we do get to the point of post-vaccine, what will have changed permanently? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to look at again how brands and people are reacting to what happened, because I think there are two extremes of that spectrum. There's a Louis Vuitton example, when you kind of approach business or life in general in a way that no matter how hard the challenge is, you kind of you look to innovate, you kind of look to plow through and then come out at the other end. And I think, oh, Brett.
Yeah, I was just giving you full screen so everybody could see you. That's all.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm still here though. It's okay.
Cool. So I think that's and it's this is kind of a sensitive topic. It's and really don't want to generalize, but I think that's one of the spectrum. But that takes a lot. That when it comes to business, you need to have a solid structure. Usually, large brands who are doing well when it comes to cash and innovation in general, they reacted very well. But that is also really dependent on the industry, right? So, for example, e-commerce or online shopping were benefiting actually from the current situation quite disproportionately compared to others. Then, there was a large chunk of every market which was kind of, I think that's the less visible, but kind of the neutral impact when you kind of your sales or operations didn't really move for the better or the worse. That's kind of the neutral part, and that's kind of less obvious because the media obviously tends to pick the extreme examples that have very heavily impacted industries, companies, people in general, and the ones who actually benefited disproportionately. But the interesting thing for me is that you can see great and not so great reactions in all of those categories, right? Like you have large brands who are doing extremely well, and they reacted very well. Like e-commerce, I'm just blown away how kind of the large players adapted to the new reality, and they kind of just took on the challenge. But they were, already in a good position. They were usually in a trajectory of growth and innovation, and cash-wise, they looked really well. But still, there were brands who were, in a very similar position, but they didn't really do anything special, and if they can afford that, good on them. Like they can decide and say, you know what, we just gonna wait till this kind of ends, and then we can afford that. I think the question really becomes interesting when you are not in that position and you really need to do something, how you react to that. And one of my favorite examples is just random coffee shops, that you can see out in the world. And it's quite striking that there were businesses who actually closed down for months, from like April till June, July, and then they opened back up in July. And there were businesses who just stayed open. And what I saw, just walking, just going to my favorite places, the places who stayed open, they were able to come back a lot faster than the ones who closed down. And that's a very general example, but I think it really tells a lot about how businesses and we as people approach extremely challenging situations. And we always have at least some level of choice when it comes to all that. And when it comes to, and how this leads to our topic, is that when it comes to just trying new things, renovating, or basically using a technology which is already out there, then it's a question of, I think the big question is which group are you in? Because obviously if you tend to just minimize risk and wait till the end, you won't really look into new solutions. You are just looking to survive. So what we see is that definitely in our conversations we talk to all types of partners, clients, peers in the industry, and like usually those conversations are around either let's improve or let's solve a challenge. Right, so those are the really two types of conversations where AR can really come into play.
Cool. I'm gonna drop you off for a second, but I'm not hanging up on you. We have Alex who's just arrived, and I have to get you in the right order so I can put your names on screen. So just give me a moment. All right, and then we've got Alex and we've got Adam. There we go. And now
they always wanted to be an Alex.
Made it.
Well, hey guys. Hey Alex. Welcome to the show. So now I've got our names up because I didn't properly introduce any of us. So Adam, you lead up business development for North America at Indie, and Alex, of course, you're the COO of Indie. So welcome again. Those are cool little name tags that I made for you. You're welcome. And we were just talking. I got Adam's view actually on the changes that we're seeing, and just wanted to get from your perspective, Alex. If you think about the changes that will actually stick right over your face there, if you're looking at commercial behavior, marketing behavior, consumer behavior, just to set up where our conversation goes today, what do you think is like feels that it's a keeper in terms of how we live our lives and market to people?
Yeah, I mean, that's a super good question, because for someone who's been digging into habits and how we create new ones that work, and researched a lot of that over the last few years. I mean, I think it's a really fascinating subject. What actually creates a new habit for us? And I think the thing about new habits is they do take a long time. There's a certain amount of being forced into things, and then there's a certain amount of being offered the opportunity to go back to the behavior you really did before, and then evaluate whether your change of behavior is actually better for you. So I think I suspect what we will go through as and when lockdown starts to lift is a little bit of people saying, great, well, I need to go back and do exactly what I was doing before, and then they realize actually what they were doing before wasn't quite as good as the thing they've started to do.
And great. And this thing they started to do was this sentence, but they never got to finish it because of technology. So, oh, you're back. Okay, we lost you for a second there, but we're sure that you said something really funny, and we loved it. But you froze.
It's probably something about the fact that I'm the only one without a beard. So that might be.
We're all working on it.
Maybe that's one of the things that would stick.
Yeah, lockdown beard. We'll see. The jury's still out on my. Calling it a beard is very nice of you. I appreciate it. But so if we think of, what will stay, what will change, it's really kind of anybody's guess. I think everybody has a gut feeling. But when you're looking at, where our world of augmented reality fits into that, I feel like it's already started to find ways to creep in. But then, a very, sarcastic devil's advocate type might be like, so where does AR even fit in? Like, seriously, I got so much going on this year, and I have to grasp this new technology. So what do you say to people when you get that question? Be like, it's bottom of my list, and then obviously you would disagree. Why do you disagree?
I think ultimately because we're now at a stage where there's enough visibility of the technology and the fact that ultimately it's going to start to permeate multiple different facets of everyone's lives, to know that it's not going to stop. This is not going away. And look, I'm old enough and long enough in the tooth to have seen new technologies that were going to change the world, not change the world. But I think there's first of all, there's a fairly widespread level of adoption already of AR at a level which might not be what I guess the highbrow might consider even being particularly sophisticated, but it is there. Let's fundamentally remember the fact that AR is a visualization technology. It is this ability to visualize things in our real world view that actually aren't there. So let's look at really kind of basically. Snap is a great example of as a company that's doing lots of stuff in AR. There are people that are doing things that are really sophisticated. Like Boeing are doing stuff with looking at engines and high-level engineering stuff. So heads-up display. There are multiple different examples, as we all know, of AR in the world that are already happening, and these are only going to improve and become more sophisticated. And then as these things become more sophisticated, people then start to think, oh, yeah, that's interesting. That might work for us too. So, we're fortunate to have these people out in the vanguard who are trying new stuff, who are out throwing spaghetti at the wall. Of course, to some extent, we are the same. So fundamentally, the technology, it's not going away. And I think you can see the investments that basically all the major handset manufacturers are making in AR tells you that this is not going away. They're not going to suddenly all abandon it. There will be absolutely no reason why. So that suggests to me that this is a technology that's here to stay, and it's a question of ultimately, to what level can we all apply it to our businesses and to our lives?
So you mentioned Spaghetti on the Wall, which was the name of a campaign you just released. And no, it's not. But I mean, a recent campaign, you know, when I think of AR at home, which is where we all are, then I think of, you know, how do I actually interact with a place or a product or a thing with my phone, with my handset, one of the handsets that you mentioned, like an iPhone, right, where you see Apple making big moves there. I wanted to just show one piece of work and then maybe get your thoughts about how, you know, how this actually fits in like the new marketing mix, right? So is it like a must-have? It sounds like a little bit corny. Is it a must-have to have AR? What are these guys going to say? Of course, they're going to say yes. But anyway, let me just show this, and let's just talk about how it is either indicative or not indicative of basically the 2021 mindset. Yeah, there's some sound, so bear with me. There we go. Spaghetti on the wall, sitting at home. So tell me about this one and just how it fits into like the mind of the marketer right now. Why would a marketer want something like this right now?
I'll hand that over to Adam.
Oh yeah. So in fact, this was a snippet from a campaign that we're just running with Benefit Cosmetics. So how all that came about is quite simply related to a product launch. So Benefit was launching a number of new products, and basically this tied into the social media campaign and the social engagement campaign that they are running at the moment. As we speak, you can go on the site and try this. Now the core here is engagement. So they just wanted better engagement with the customer, and that's really the challenge that we see currently. And I think we all feel that when we used to spend time online, we used to spend time at home, but not this much, right? So then what brands feel and see is that you need to engage people digitally, but you still need to give more value. So we have powerful tools, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, social media channels and all that. But then the question comes like, how do I create better engagement? Which obviously results to better conversion rates at the end of the day if you're launching a product. So that's the end of the story. But the starting question in this case was really engagement. So that was the starting point, and this is how this campaign came to life.
So if you think about when I look at this, I see a brand trying to figure out another way to earn my eyeballs, right? Mm-hmm. They know that they've got to, but that my new home is the web shop. That's where I'm living, right? So, or my Instagram. So it's found a way to kind of like, pique my senses a little bit. It's got give me something else to do this. So. And eventually it entertains me because it's cute, beep, 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 right? Like it's cute. So how can a brand really entertain? So like, what else could you do with your brand in the seated position in my house? So this is going to be like in my living room, and actually everything that you put up always ends up in my living room, including the Bernie meme, which you put out. When it was time to put out, which was one day window to do that, and you made it. so I should have had that up. But everyone, check out indie.ar, and then you'll probably, well, you know what? I'll share a link later. But then you can put Bernie in your living room. The show was a little bit late for this show, but it's great. So I mean, and that actually was a lot of fun because I'm sitting at home in my LinkedIn feed. I see that I can play with Bernie, and then I do that. I take a video and I show it. It definitely went in all my professional WhatsApp groups and all that kind of stuff. So you did deliver me for free, and I thank you, a very delightful moment that I hadn't expected. And that's what I think this does. So do you have like other examples in mind, or other ways that a brand can try to entertain, even when people weren't expecting to be entertained by them? This is like a on the spot creative strategy session. So sorry.
Sure. Again, I think it really comes down to kind of the size of the challenge that you're facing, right? Like one straightforward example, for example, is sports and the stadium experience itself. So because that is non-existent at the moment, and then then in terms of so to speak, size of the challenge, that's a quite big one, because you as a brand, as a sports team, you'd like to engage your fans, and then in April we thought this is going to last for a couple of months, hopefully, and now I think we're 10 months in. So you as a sports team, for example, you really start to think what else you could do digitally, and then for them, just this is an example, but the player, the moment with the player, or the feeling of you going to the game and then actually experiencing that. That's something very unique. And then, at that point, it's not just nice to have for a team, but it's a must have, because you need to keep in touch with your fans. It's great that, you can show the game and games are actually, on. That's huge, I think, for all of us who love sports. But then, when it comes to branding and just driving the message and keeping in touch with your fans, then you start to raise your questions, regarding how you actually do that after, that long of an absence, so to speak.
So on the sports thing, I just want to jump in because it's very topical right now. Tokyo 2021, question mark. So suppose that it does happen. It's going to be mostly audience-less, right? Or at least the Asians who have, taken their precautions in the right way so that they can go have fun now, right? At least, everyone from Wuhan is like, we're good. So most people, just like every year, will partake in the Olympics as a spectator from very far away. And I wonder now, do you think that there's like a brand opportunity, like even more of a brand opportunity because of that, right? So there's never been really any expectation you get to go there, but now it's just like, it ain't happening, right? It's only on TV, which means it's not just happening where it's happening everywhere and however you want to make it happen, right? So do you feel like that you should start thinking about that? Or does it feel like, why bother because we don't know if it's going to be a thing or not? Like, it's a very kind of hard thing to predict because maybe they killed the whole idea. What's your advice to a sports marketer right now who was going to have a great Olympics year and is wondering?
Well, it's an enormous challenge to maintain your sense of connection between your brand or even your sport and your consumer, your fan, at a time where actually it's just not available to you fundamentally. I mean, even the televisual spectacle that we're all getting, which is of games, whether that be basketball, whether that be hockey, whether it be soccer, whether it be rugby, of stadia which are either empty with artificial noise or people kind of half in there, whatever. It's not the same experience fundamentally. And we all thrive off that. We're all, to some extent, tribal, and that's a real expression of who we are. And when that's taken away from us, it's something that really does detract from our everyday existence. I mean, there are plenty of people who invest in kind of season tickets where their year is designed around being able to go to these games and have the experience that you have with all your buddies, watching the game, win or lose. And that's the thing, of course, that sponsors pay a fortune for. So they can take a piece of that attention and be associated with it. Now, people still want to have connection with their fan. People still want to have connection with their teams, and the competition for eyeballs and the competition for the depth of association is stronger than ever. So, but how do you do that if your traditional means of communication are gone? I mean, do you just sort of say, right, well, I tell you what, we'll just do nothing, and then we'll go back to normal, we'll start again. The reality is we don't know when things are going to start again. So how do you think how do you engage with your fans? You have to think of going, you have to think of being creative. And I think that's one of the things that AR and other newer technologies bring, is the ability to connect at a deeper level. I mean, fundamentally, if you are interacting, even if it's with a digital character on your desk or on your sofa at home, you are going to spend much longer playing with this character or trying to be part of the scene than you would do seeing another piece of advertising real estate on your website. And it's just not interesting. You want to have something more. You want to establish a deeper connection, and interactivity breeds a deeper connection. It really is kind of that simple. I spent many years working in sports marketing and media and sponsorship, and everyone is craving these kind of metrics that people try and create to show, look, well, you gave us this and we turned it into this, of artificial something or other. But the reality is what everyone is desperate for is attention. Everyone wants to really get across their messaging during that period where people are engaged in the experience. And therefore, the more interactive and the deeper the experience, the more likely you are to get your message across. And what's interesting now is that the clubs, the organizations, we talked about this, I think, on one of the sports sessions historically, we've got clubs and leagues and other organizations who are actually doing these kind of initiatives directly now with their fans. They're not necessarily just waiting for a sponsor to push it. The club recognizes that they need to get out there and be connected with their fans, because if they don't have the fan base, they can't attract the sponsors, which help bring money in. They're not going to have the viewership, which helps bring money in, which means they're not going to be the team they were. So again, it's kind of depth of interaction in new and challenging and interesting ways that really gives you that fan engagement. That's the word that everyone's desperate for these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's just no easy thing, right? Because in the end, and we've had a chat before, I'm sure we will again. The sports, the 360 sports experience is pretty location based, right? So there's a lot that you're taking in from a sensory point of view that is difficult to replace, but there is, I think what most sports marketers I've spoken to agree is that it's worth trying, and figuring out if there's some way to connect, and maybe there are ways to connect that we hadn't even thought of, right? And it's like, if I look at AR activations that you've done, and then where the technology could go for, you see the entertainers in that space, you see consumer brands doing it, you can see where it could go, and there's just a huge canvas of creativity that's waiting to be tapped into. It just requires someone to spend the time and think about what's next in mobile AR, or kind of what you can do on your phone. I always get the terminology wrong, but I mean the stuff you do on your phone, and that's, there's just so much possible there. So if you think of just even the lighter touch things, right? So we want to get into AR, but we're not ready for that, what I just described, which is like the mind-blowing Inception level, Christopher Nolan version of AR. If you think about just the lens craze, so can you ground me and where we are on the lens craze, right? So what is the state of AR lenses? What is like old news? What is now? What is next? Is there a conversation on that? Because I still see them everywhere, and every week on here I'm always talking about my daughters, but I hear plenty of people who are older than my daughters still wanting to do this. So what's the state of play in the lens in the lens market right now?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So when it comes to that, it always so with lenses and filters specifically, your let's just say space within you can move and create experience. It's it's greatly defined by the platforms, right? Like Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, and they are improving at a very, very fast pace. So the lenses that we can create right now, those are going to be a lot more sophisticated, even a couple of months down the line, or not even talking about years. So we see huge improvements in the platform end. It's very clear if you look at what Facebook and Snapchat is doing, they are actually building that into their commercial model and their engagement model when it comes to the news feed. So you will continue to see more, and the reason for that is because lenses, filters, AR powered lenses and filters are very creating very high levels of engagement. There's a simple reason. We all know, like Facebook, Instagram, they are following the money, right? Like they are following clicks and that's spent. And that's the reason they provide creators and brands a lot more opportunity to actually utilize the platform and create more. And I think it's gonna be a very very similar market to, for example, digital design, web design, digital strategy in general. When you one end you find the bedroom developers, and on the other end you find high-end agencies who can really walk you through the whole process. So I think as we see platforms provide the opportunity for both of those creators, and then now it's a question from the brands or the leaders of a certain business of which direction they would take. But I think just going back to the previous question Dax covered, I think it really comes down to managing risk, right? Because for example, the Olympics is a great example. You can plan something which is on site, which is now seems a little bit higher risk. So digital is something that you can roll out in whatever shape the Olympics will happen. So I think the big advantage that all of us and all brands and companies have right now is that through technology they can manage risk better, because even if the situation they need to pull out plan C, they can do that. It's not just Olympics gonna happen digitally fully and I can't do anything. You can actually do very very exciting and interesting and engaging things. So I think the key here for this year specifically is how you decide to manage risk. Like what is your choice in terms of creating experience that's for sure I can roll out, or maybe, or it's very risky if I can make it happen. And lenses and filters are on the low risk end, so to speak.
It's almost like, and maybe I could coin a bit of a marketing phrase here, is that in 2020, events are maybe location based, but they're not location bound. Hey, right? Because they're everywhere. They're everywhere, wherever you are, because you can't go to where it actually is. That means it's everywhere. So it's actually a huge democratization of it. A different experience, but you can still kind of invent what it is, right? Should we just have that engraved somewhere, that phrase? Yes, I think so.
I think you need to be paid for it, really.
Yes, I agree. I'm just kidding. But yeah, so what do you think about that? Like, do you feel like...
I think it's. I mean, I think Adam sort of raised an interesting point. I mean, I think ultimately all great initiatives or projects or themes are multi-channel. So, and you adapt your content depending on how your consumer consumes the experience down to each channel, and interactive. Let's put a broad label on it. Is its own channel. People consume interactive in a different way than they do linear. Same way people consume television in a different way to they consume radio. And one isn't at the exclusion of the other. There is a very good example. I mean, already people are talking about the second screen, and have done for a long time. People using their mobiles to add to their TV viewing experience, like voting on America's Got Talent or whatever it is. So we already know that multiple channels doesn't kill any particular channel. What it does is it just nuances people's consumption of content down that channel. And I think really what Adam suggests here is effectively offsetting risk is a very sensible way of doing it. That ultimately, if the only way you can consume an event is by doing a live event in a physical location, and irrespective of whether there's a pandemic, if there is something which cancels your event, well, you don't really want to have that kill your project, do you? So the reality is that if you are spreading your eyeballs across multiple channels where one enhances the other, it's like legs of a stool, isn't it? You take one away, the likelihood of the whole thing falling over is less.
That said, I mean, if you think of sports to one side, if I look at I didn't mention it, but I'm in Belgium, and the museums are open, right? So there's actually there's a class of category that is being somewhat protected. It depends where you are, and this depends in the U.S., especially what state you're in, and also your risk appetite, right? So, but there is, I wouldn't say that there's a level of business as usual in some places, but there's a level of business that is more usual than others, right? So thinking of, if I look across kind of like the indie portfolio of Graceland comes to mind, and I'll just throw that up, is the idea that there are people who are still really eager to get out, and in some cases they're actually able to do that. He's like in crazy fast forward mode. I don't know how that happened, but he's like so excited. And now he's gonna slow down. And for that, do you feel like, and Adam, more to you because I know that you work more in North America than other places. Do you feel that these locations are feeling the need to give people an extra reason to come now? Or, like why would a museum, which in many cases is the only shop in town that's open for fun outside of the McDonald's drive-through.
Yeah.
And I can say that being from the Midwest, like that's probably the case in Cleveland right now, although the restaurants are open. Do they feel they need to innovate, or can they just be like, look, we're the only one open, just come? What do you think?
Yeah. The museum space is a particularly interesting one because, a lot of museums branded themselves hands-on. So they they really focus on experiences which were on purpose you going and building and ultimately touching something. So one big dynamic that we see in the museum space is touchless. They just need to integrate touchless experiences, and that in many cases that comes with change. So even if you are the only place open, you had to make a fundamental shift if you didn't have too many digital experiences. When in a fairly large space you can provide a compelling experience to people, you had to look for a solution. So there was that piece when that was kind of mandatory, so to speak, that you had to do, and in other cases when museums who were kind of science museums, science centers, who are by definition they usually more focused on interactive experiences, then indeed like as you mentioned, then what's happening, it's really defined by the resources in the museum space, and I'm getting very technical here, right? But museums who could allot grants and government support, then they use that to actually the downtime, by the time they come back, and this is what happened in Graceland, they just use the downtime to actually renew the experience and really invest into new attractions. So when they open back up, that can happen, with higher visitor numbers, and then they can market it better. So those are the two things that we see happening. You either innovate, so you are better prepared for reopening, or you actually had to do it because you had to go touchless without hands, instead of hands-on.
I think this is also one of the other areas where I think, going back to the original question, the areas that we think are really going to stick. I think what's been very clear is that education is going to change. I mean, there's been, having looked into this area reasonably kind of thoroughly, I certainly didn't realize even initially, irrespective of the pandemic, how many colleges in the States offer remote courses that people genuinely participate in. So the remote learning is already happening and it is growing. And what's really interesting now is that there's some, like proper chunks of money being invested in education and taking education outside of the classroom, whether that be from school age through to college age and beyond. That's a big shift, and will only be assisted by the fact that people have had to be educated at home. So you've had that kind of like real feet to the fire, demonstration of the shortcomings of current platforms. So I think that stuff will change. And what is interesting about that, and again, having worked with both the kind of education sector and the museum sector for a while, we know the challenges that these museums face, which is budget in most cases. So money can go into education and start to extract some of that content out of museums, digitize it and get it into classrooms. That's a huge shift, and ultimately it benefits everyone.
Yeah, I mean, entertainment, and it's interesting that you bring it up. Entertainment it tends to be a bit of a focus on this show that we do. But I think huge technological shifts are often driven by things that are considered like super essential, right? So we must have this, and I think education is undergoing this revolution where people realize what already is possible, and why don't we just do it that way anyway? And why does Harvard cost so much, right? If we could just do it from here, that's one thing. But I mean, that's the highest level from a U.S. perspective. But then just every level of education that seemed to be bound, again, location-based, and now that's not an option, but education must go on, much more so than a football or rugby game must go on. So it's technology just must provide. And then once you've kind of dipped your toes in, you think, well, why can't we make this even better? So it's almost like a new industry has arisen. Have you seen from your side, what's your feeling of how fast the education segment will go? Just what are your predictions for AR in education? We didn't prepare this at all, as we don't prepare much ever, but this is a really interesting one. It might even demand its own show. So what do you think about AR and education in general? How fast are we moving?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think, there's an interesting starting thought to that, which is how you redefine innovation, right? Because if someone never saw, some of the experiences that you delivered, let's say, 8, 9 years ago, then they might think that was, developed a year ago. And then they would say, oh, this is something completely new. And ultimately call it innovation. But in truth, these experiences, for example, I'm talking about large screen usage of AR, that solution, when you activate large LED screens, projection screens, plasma walls, that's been going on for, almost a decade now. We had, hundreds of locations, just countless case studies and all that. So I think, what these spaces and what education usually needs is comfort, like they just need to be extremely sure that this is being tried and tested. And we are just always trying to be conscious of that from our side as well, that just to make sure that we show examples that we did, back then, because they actually, become relevant again during these times when you realize, you actually need to show something new to our audience. So there's an interesting dynamic going on, when you actually dig deeper and think that's something completely new and no one ever done it, and then you actually learn that this had been done, by many other museums, science centers. So I think that's kind of I would say the initial challenge that we see with education conversations and in that space. But then, once that kind of initial phase is passed, then, they tend to move pretty quick. So
just wanted to round us off with a final question here. And this is something that I've just wondered myself as as I've gotten to know AR over the past year, because I've been a little bit more involved than a normal agency guy would be. And I wonder if this is the year where we start to think of AR as one of the boxes that we go through on our checklist, in the marketing mix, because we used to think, okay, media, all the social channels, the website, the e-commerce, right? And so there are always those obvious boxes to tick. And I wonder if AR is kind of next on the list to become that. And I guess my question is, do you feel that the ease of producing something or conceiving something and the ease of a customer or whoever's on the other end, like accessing it and interacting with it, that the ease of all those things is making it so that it becomes more of a reflex for a marketer to think of? Or do you feel that that reflex is still yet to be developed?
Well, yeah, I can start on this one. I'm very curious what Alex thinks. I think in that sense, there are two really interesting parts of our market at the moment. So definitely, marketing and advertising related conversations. In those, I think it's rather the latter that you mentioned, that, now it's actually, if you are building a marketing campaign, you are thinking about AR. So that's more of a given at the moment. But still, it really depends on on the actual market that we are looking at. So some industries tend to move faster, even when we are talking about marketing and advertising. But my main point with this question would be is the industries where they use AR as business as usual. For example, theme parks, entertainment in general, location-based entertainment, digital out-of-home advertising, and the people who are more on the technical side, who provide the infrastructure. There AR is going to be a technology that really transforms parts of the entire industry. So instead of one-off thing that I do as a marketer because I want to run a campaign, it's going to be something. Basically, it's going to be a technology that helps you to transform and elevate the customer experience, not just once but for years to come, and for the future. And so we see these type of conversations going on when it comes to advertising, marketing, and engaging people on site and digitally.
Alex, what do you think? Is it a reflex? Or is it a muscle that needs to be developed? Oh, I think you've wait. Sorry, I think you've muted yourself. There we go. So let's have that again, Alex. Reflex or yes? That's how we want it, and that's our show, everybody. Please.
Thank you and good night. Yeah, I mean, I think at the moment it's definitely not a reflex. It's something that is, people do TV, and then it's online. And, it's like people follow the crowd, and that's the sort of tragedy of this. And what's interesting, I had a conversation with someone, an old colleague in the media industry, and I said, well, isn't now the time for people to try something new? Because, it's everything else is kind of on hold at the moment. And they said, well, look, tragically, most brands don't do that. When things are a bit tough, they revert to type. They go back to safety. They go back to the sort of safe zone. And that is actually arguably the last thing they should be doing. And this is the thing that is, that we in the industry need to keep working on is to offer people a safe and simple solution to try something new, to get to blood you really in this particular channel, and give you an understanding of ultimately the benefits it can provide, which we feel are compelling. But then we would say that, wouldn't we? That's very nice, the challenge. So we do need to be able to get to think creatively, and it's a problem. It's a problem in the industry. I think people do things by numbers, do things by statistics, but that's retrospective. We need people to look at the future and think, okay, well, look, I've spent 80% of my budget on the stuff I normally spend it on. What am I going to spend 20% on that really might be a game changer? Those are the people we really want to talk to, because it can be a game changer.
It seems like, as a technology company active in marketing, you're always going to be focused on kind of the first movers, right? And then at least the first followers. So that group up there. And then everyone else will eventually catch up. By that time, you will have had to move on to the next batch of first movers, whatever that is, right? So a challenge, I suppose, to get people's to test it out. But I think that if you look at the options now, and maybe you can tell me versus 10 years ago, there's a lot they can do to test it out, rather than having to go all in and blow their whole annual budget on a thing where maybe that was, they could still very much dump their whole budget on you. I'm sure you'll find a way, but there's also smaller things to toy with, like a lens, or I don't know what else.
No, I think it's exactly the point. I mean, I think that, you can go in at a lens, you can look at something which is app-based and relatively limited. You can do some action, which is much more substantial. You can do the kind of web-based AR that we looked at with the cosmetics. We can do anything from that level up to something which is ultimately much more physically immersive as well as digitally immersive. But I think it is now a question that we think people should be considering. How do I look at positioning my brand or my organization, if it's a museum, if it's a sports club or whatever? How do I start to position myself in this new channel? Because it is fundamentally a new channel. It's a new way of consuming content. This wonderfully kind of interactive immersive way of consuming content that people haven't had the opportunity to do before.
Mm.
So how do we get people to start to take those baby steps?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just an additional point on that is that, as we discussed, the platforms are pushing the technology. So it's not, not our team or our other similar companies, provide these solutions who try to, kind of go uphill. It's rather a wave that's coming. If you check, what Snap is doing or Facebook is doing, what out of home media, media owners who own large format digital are doing. They're all preparing for dynamic advertising, introducing new ways to engage people. So it's rather people who actually, and the companies who own the platforms are the ones looking at the technology and saying this is the next step for us, like big time. And we are just happen to be in a space when we can provide solutions around that. But that's the underlying dynamic. That's why we can have these conversations.
Cool. And it's a technology that's here that the platforms are making possible to access. It's not like, what did I read about today? Coors Light would like to implant dreams into your brain. I don't know if you heard that. Google that, folks. That's the new thing that I just read on LinkedIn today. So that's the new add the dream inception to your marketing mix. So maybe if we tell people that that's the new thing, then they'll be like, oh, AR, yes, that's the easy thing, right? So, guys, thanks for joining me on this. I think we kind of took a pretty fun tour of different ways that this technology is popping up. I think there's clearly an opportunity to still be first, but also not be so first that it's scary, right? And then just prove that it works for you. And if it doesn't, obviously look at other technologies as well. AR is not the only thing. It happens to be the focus of a show called AR Explainer. But of course, we realize that there's a lot out there. And we'll see what this year brings. Hopefully, only better stuff than we've seen so far. Cool. Well, thanks a lot, guys. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you again very soon on AR Explainer. Bye.
Thanks so much, guys. Bye.
All right. See ya.